Hey everyone, thanks for joining us for the next session of our Ask the Expert series. My name is Anna, your producer for this session. I'm an event planner for Reactor, joining you from Redmond, Washington. Before we start, I do have some quick housekeeping. Please take a moment to read our code of conduct. We seek to provide a respectful environment for both our audience and presenters. While we absolutely encourage engagement in the chat, we ask that you please be mindful of your commentary, remain professional and on topic. Keep an eye on that chat. We'll be dropping helpful links and checking for questions for our presenters to answer live. Our session is being recorded. It will be available to view right here on the Microsoft Reactor channel. With that, let's start the show.
Awesome. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining this webinar today. We have an expert panel here of Power BI from the Power BI team. I'll let everybody introduce themselves, but before that, my name is Nandini. I'm part of the product marketing team and I work for Power BI. So Sujata, I'll hand it over to you.
Yeah. Hey, everyone. I'm Sujata Narayana. I'm a GPM at Power BI.
Christine?
Hi, everyone. I'm a GPM at Power BI as well. I'm Christian Wade.
And then, hi, I'm Lauren Faber, and I'm a principal product manager on Power BI as well.
Great. So we have an expert panel lined up. We're looking forward to your questions and looking at it in the chat. Before that, we can talk a little bit about why we are here today. We're going to talk about AI and what value you can get from it. So before we dive in, we all know that AI is only as good as the data behind it. So if the data is messy, inconsistent, or defined differently, then your AI is inconsistent and you get messy answers. And so that's the importance of the backend, your semantic models, and prepping your data for the AI readiness. So think of semantic models as your business logic. When somebody asks you what is the revenue or who's your customer, it has to be defined the same way. And so AI has to know that it has to be defined the same way across these different teams. When it comes to prepping your data for AI, it's not just about cleaning it, but it's also about organizing it, structuring it, prioritizing certain data sets for AI to pick up from. And so that is another important aspect as well. And Lauren, I'd love to invite you to talk a little bit about Prep Your Data for AI. It's one of the newer features that we announced recently. So what does it entail and what does it provide organizations?
Yeah, absolutely. So we shipped this past May that help you to prepare your data or your semantic model to work better with AI or Power BI Copilot. So the main things that we shipped are verified answers, which this allows you as a model author to choose a visual that is in your report and set that as a verified answer by you as the author to say when a consumer or user is asking a specific question, this is the answer that has been signed off, certified, or verified from an actual individual as the correct answer. And the verified answer is going to serve as both a way for users when they ask a question that is semantically similar to the phrase that you have set to get that answer back. And it's also going to help Copilot to be able to understand, take in that information and help it ground for other answers as well. So verified answers actually has a twofold benefit of being able to give this green check mark verified answer back to the user, but it's also going to help improve additional questions that users will be asking Copilot that might not necessarily be a return verified answer, but it's going to help with the accuracy of those other questions as well. The next thing that we introduced with this Prep Your Data for AI feature is AI instructions. So this allows you as the semantic model author to provide business context or put in business terms of how the LLM should navigate your data to help curate the right answers. So this is not any sort of way to take a model that might be messy and try and fix it with instructions, but this is a way to give Copilot context that is specific to your business or your team or your organization, that without that context, Copilot's going to have no way to know that information. So one of the examples that I love to give is around the term busy season. Every single organization probably defines this busy season differently. It's different weeks or different months. And a user might be trying to get an answer from Copilot around like, what were our sales last busy season? And without giving Copilot these instructions and to define what that means for your team or your organization, it's not going to know how to give the correct answer with the term that the user is asking. So instructions can really help Copilot to get more context around your business to navigate to the right answers. And then the last feature is the schema selection. So this is going to allow you to help define and configure specifically what part of your data schema within your semantic model that Copilot has access to. So one of the things with the schema selection is that when there's a lot of measures, sometimes as you're building your model or your report, you have various test measures that you're using and they're named similarly, or there's similar context for them. Copilot might have a little bit of a struggle understanding how to differentiate between, all of the different types of sales measures or the different sales fields or columns. And so giving a reduced subset of your schema to Copilot is going to help it to be more accurate because it has a better idea and knows exactly where to point to specific data to give you the answer that you need. And the thing with all of these is that they're all pretty powerful tools in isolation, but they actually work even better together. So for example, narrowing down, which fields to use, but then also supplying instructions of what type of terms should map to what fields, and putting that with a verified answer is really what's going to give the best experience to allow your users to get the most out of Copilot and really prepare your data. So I'm going to take us through a video quickly of these experiences. I don't want to monopolize too much of the time, but I do want to showcase some of these features that we did ship this past May, because they are really helpful in getting your data ready, your semantic model ready to chat with Copilot. So the first thing you'll notice is I'm in Power BI desktop and I have this prep data for AI button that has been introduced. And when I go to click on that, I'm going to get this dialog pop up with this get started page that's going to show me and talk through those features that I just mentioned. The first thing that I'm going to want to do here is I'm going to start by simplifying that data schema. So my schema that I have in my semantic model is going to show up, but I don't want every single field, measure, hierarchy to be passed to Copilot. I have a couple of test measures that I've been playing around with, and I'm just going to go ahead and say Copilot doesn't need to see any of those measures. So I'm going to save this preparation work, and then now I know that there's going to be a reduced schema that Copilot will see when answering questions from my users. The next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and add a verified answer, which verified answers are added from the visuals on the actual report page. So first I'm going to select the visual. I'm going to click the right ellipses and click on create verified answers. So now from here, I can set different trigger phrases for users to say if a user asks a question that is semantically similar to this phrase that I'm assigning to this visual, I want a verified answer to be returned. Or like I mentioned, it's going to help in grounding and answering other questions, even if they're not specific to this question. Now I can add filters to this visual. I can add additional trigger phrases for the users as well. And then throughout that UI, I can manage the verified answer. And then the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add in some AI instructions. So this is where the example that I gave earlier around busy season, I'm going to actually add these instructions in here, and I'm going to let Copilot know that busy season is defined as April to November within this organization or this team that I'm preparing the data for. So once I've done all of these things within that dialog, I'm going to go ahead and hit apply and close, and that's going to save these changes to the model. So now when I ask Copilot, what is the spending over time for Maui, I am going to get this verified answer return that's going to say, hey, your question matches verified answer. And I can also use the how Copilot arrived at this button to understand more about where this answer was coming from. And then if I didn't quite get the right answer, you'll see that it says to improve results, prep your data for AI, which is going to take me to that dialogue again to continue to prep. So then this next question around how many visitors were there during busy season in 2016? Well, because I've defined busy season within the AI instructions, Copilot now knows what months I was referring to and could give the answer accordingly based on those instructions. So these are a couple of the features. But then another thing that we have introduced is the ability to actually mark a semantic model as ready for AI or prepped for AI. So within the Power BI service, I can go to this AI preparation setting and I can actually have this marked as prepped for AI. So I know as the model author that I've gone through, I've tested, I feel confident in the results that are going to be given when a user in my organization goes and interacts with Copilot. And so I want to actually give my blessing on this model and say, this is ready to be consumed and used by Copilot. And that's going to do a couple of things within the product today. It's going to, I don't want to get too much into this because this kind of goes into our standalone Copilot experience, but it's going to help elevate the experience for that model within our full screen standalone experience that I'm sure we'll talk about on this call. And then it's also going to help users so that if this is not set on a model, when interacting with data from that semantic model that doesn't have this setting, they'll actually get a notification to the effect of, hey, just be super aware and conscious when getting answers from this specific data because this has not been marked as prepped for AI within your organization. So that way users can be trained and understand the various ways of when they can trust data and know that it has been prepared by the semantic model author and that it's been given that blessing to be used with Copilot. So those are some of the features that we launched in May, as I mentioned. We have more coming in the following months, so stay tuned for some of those announcements. And I just also want to say that, again, none of these features are to replace good practices with semantic models. The first foundational thing to make sure is that you're following those best practices with your semantic models to make sure that they work the best with Copilot.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Lauren. I'd love to hear from the audience. Have you seen these features before? Are you using them in your organization? How's it going? What's your feedback? If you can drop something in the chat, that'll be great. It sounds like Yash has actually tried this new feature with semantic models and it's pretty good. Thank you for the feedback, Yash. We have a question coming from Zahir Mohideen. He says, we have a Pro license and Copilot is not available in Pro Workspace. So what are the features available for Pro Workspace? Christian, you want to take this? You know, there are some limitations in what a Pro license offers, but what can somebody with a Pro license do in order to help their organization be more prepared for AI?
Yeah, thank you, Nandi. Hi, Zahir. So, yeah, we're aware that you do need an F64 or above capacity in order to use all of the Copilot capabilities across a large organization. We are reviewing that licensing model. We don't have anything to share at this moment in time. But yeah, we are looking to make Copilot more widely available. But as I say, nothing to share right now.
That's good to know. And then Shreya Srinath asked, can the verified answers be set up with visuals using field parameters? Lauren, do you want to take that?
So today, the verified answers have to be on a visual on the report, and you can apply, I believe it's up to 3 filters on the visual. That is the only experience that we offer today, but we are investing in improving that experience.
That's good to know. Awesome. We do have a question from Jan. Jan says, why do I have to write and maintain the AI instructions, example, the season in each report, or once per semantic model? Can they actually instead do it centrally in like a SharePoint or Purview for it to, take over all of the semantic models and reports?
Yeah, this is a great question, and one that we've been talking to different organizations about. There's definitely the different levels and the granularity in which different business terms or instructions should be had. More upstream, more downstream, things that might be consistent throughout an organization versus a team that might define things differently. What I will say is that we're definitely aware of this, and there's investments that are being made to be able to do this type of business definition more upstream. That, again, I'd say stay tuned for some of the things that are going to be coming in the next few months. So today, this is what we offer on semantic models, but there's more things that we will be bringing in to do things both upstream and more granularly.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And Rani asked another licensing related question. So they have a PTU license and they want to know if they can use Copilot features. Rani, again, like the pro license, the per user licenses actually do not have access to Copilot right now. So you would need that fabric capacity license. We have opened it up to F2 and above. So you'll be able to use it, but you do need that fabric capacity license. And then a follow-up is, can I feed in the data model and ask if it follows star schema, and if not, what changes are needed?
Yeah, I can speak to that one. So right now we are mainly focused on the investments that we've released that Lauren shared was more about enabling kind of that context to Copilot of giving context like custom instructions, giving grounding with verified answers, and also helping scope down the view of where Copilot should focus on for the semantic model. There's another set of investments that we're looking at of really around helping modeling best practices in general, and really guiding users through that. And so we don't have details yet to share on that, but the team is totally aware that we know that a big prereq before what Lauren kind of showed of the kind of that Copilot prepping your data for AI, a big prereq is you need to make sure your semantic model is good. And so we're definitely aware of this feedback that it would be nice to have the system be able to help guide you through that experience and help you know that if you're following best practices like star schema, or if any kind of ambiguity in your data model that you need to address. So we're aware of this feedback as well, and we're currently under works of building something out that's going to help customers with that experience, but just no details yet, unfortunately, to share.
Yeah. Can I add something to that, Ndini?
Yep.
Yeah, thank you. So thank you, Sujata. I completely agree with what Sujata said. A good semantic model prior to Copilot and AI is still a good semantic model in the age of AI. It's just that the tooling that Lauren showed is a layer on top of that. Now, a good semantic model is going to be very helpful to promote AI consumption in your organization, because it's always been about answering ad hoc business questions. So now the AI can ask those ad hoc business questions and get back a consistent answer, rather than having to generate 17 different queries depending on the day of the week, right? So that's what semantic models are all about, is consistent ad hoc reporting. That's why we are so well positioned with semantic models, with the presence of semantic models in customer organizations today for AI-enabled consumption. Okay.
That's great.
Thank you.
Awesome. So I just want to take a pause and maybe, I'm seeing a lot of questions coming in about Copilot and AI in general. Lara, I'll turn it over to you. Many customers right now, many users are very familiar with Power BI and that BI space, right? How can they start making a transition into AI, into Copilot, into that area? What are some steps that they should be taking to be ready as an organization to start using AI?
Sure. Yeah. So as we first rolled out Copilot last year or so, we saw a lot of users getting value and asking questions, being able to, understand the report better, especially if, it's much easier to ask a question and get it back versus, looking at every single page of maybe a very extensive report. And so with that, we've been finding a lot of, customer stories where they're driving adoption and being able to get answers quicker, being able to get executive summaries, putting it onto a presentation or a review, getting daily updates. Where we're seeing the transition now is exactly what this call is about, and what Lauren discussed, Sujata discussed, Christian, is making sure your semantic models are ready. So as we know, a lot of Power BI is well integrated into the enterprise ecosystem, meaning that over the last several years, up to a decade, we have a lot of models and reports existing in enterprise organizations. And so with the different tools that we have released over this past couple months, it's incredibly important to make sure that you're, for example, starting with your apps, the apps that you know that are highly curated, and you have a set of users, especially that's typically what's distributed the highest, 50 to 100 end users versus maybe a workspace, making sure those reports and reports and models have been prepped. So starting with the model, just readiness of, does it have the proper, best practices, making sure that you have your schema, you have, you don't have ambiguous terms. So once you follow the best practices for modeling, then you go into the tooling. So we see modeling as making just general best practices for modeling that we've had over the years, but the tooling aspect takes it to another level because now you're giving context to Copilot. So even if you make changes to the model, make sure it's the best model possible, Copilot will still need some context in maybe business terms, maybe, understanding that your specific business terms means a item, like for example, maybe up like a high number actually means low target. So being able to add that context, and then also another setting that we have is, I think Lauren, you may want to talk about it more, but prep for AI. So because we know we have a lot of models and reports existing in the enterprise, there is what's called in the standalone experience, which is the full page Copilot. It will show you that this data may not has been prepped. So even though items are existing in your artifacts, when a consumer goes in and asks a question, an end user, they will see a warning or a note that, hey, this may not have been fully prepped yet by the author. And so that gives them some kind of assurance of how much they can trust that answer. When a model author does come in and does the prep, you can remove that. And so that gives more confidence in what report they should be asking questions on, what answers they can have validated. So like, for example, having verified answers, being able to see that this has attached a verified answer, that the model author basically approved it. And so that is able to be sourced and asked in the Copilot experience, and then you can share that answer wherever you need it in your business workflow. So I will say where we are, we have the tools out there. We would love the feedback and what could help your end users be more successful in getting the answers they need quickly. So that's kind of where we see a lot of the prep and transition we're going now to make this experience successful is definitely making sure that Copilot can answer to the best that it can with the model and context.
Awesome. That's a great answer. Going back to some of the questions here, I see Isaac has asked, hi, I have a school account and I'm learning about Fabric and Power BI. Is there some limitations on it? Because I can't use Copilot for any deep dive. So Isaac, like we said in for the previous question as well, you do need that Fabric capacity license in order to access Copilot. And so maybe your school or some sort of enterprise account would be helpful to get access to the Fabric capacity license. Yash has a comment. Yash says, I feel like a single semantic model with incremental refresh is the way forward for me, but I'm trying to set it up efficiently now. I'd like to use this model to support downstream reporting in Excel. So that's good to hear, Yash. Any comments from the GPMs, or is this the right way Yash should be thinking about it?
I can answer Yash's question unless anyone else wants to go first. So Yash, good to know you're using incremental refresh, and you're absolutely welcome to use Excel to consume data from your semantic models. It's been there for seems forever, and it will be forever. It's just you're like Sujata was saying earlier. A good semantic model that is scalable, that uses incremental refresh for massive volumes, billions of rows. All of that stays the same, but now that same semantic model is going to be made available to AI and Copilot and chat with your data type scenarios. So everything you're doing is 100% valid and a good thing. You've just now got a new way of surfacing that data from your semantic model to your business users using Copilot and this chat with your data scenario.
Okay. Awesome. We have a question from Wouter. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name, but his question is about fabric lake houses are just, sorry, it's a question from Jan. Sorry, I misread that. Jan wants to know, is it possible to give information about columns via comments on the column? So fabric lake houses do not support column comments, but most other RDBMSs do. And so I'm not sure if this is fully related to this topic, but does anybody want to answer, or we can maybe redirect Jan to some of our documentation?
Yeah, I'd recommend redirecting that to the Lakehouse team, Nandine.
Yeah, it's this question around being able to give information on the semantic model itself, not on the data within the Lakehouse. If this question is talking about like within the semantic model, I want to be able to add information about my fields and my columns, then there's a couple of ways to do this. Today, you can actually add descriptions on your columns and fields. Descriptions are used by some Copilot features, but not all of them today. So I'd look into our documentation for that. And then within the AI instructions, if you want to add specifics, you can actually reference, not like directly, but you can pick a field or the column title and give information to AI instructions as well. So I'm not sure if this is what the question is getting at, but there are ways today to give context to your fields and columns in a semantic model.
That's great. Hopefully that's helpful, Jan. Otherwise, we do have extensive documentation on lake houses as well, and hopefully that's helpful. I'm going to go over to Reddit to answer a couple of questions there. So one question we have is, how can we use AI as a Power BI developer? This person has used AI extensively in other fields like software engineering to generate code and fix bugs, but they want to know what are the direct applications of AI from a developer standpoint. Christine, would you like to take this one?
Yeah, I can share my thoughts initially, and perhaps Sujata will be able to elaborate as well, because this is a very exciting topic for us. Like at the moment, we've gone to market with this AI-enabled consumption, this chat with your data scenario, which is for the end users, for the business users that want to perform ad hoc analysis on top of their semantic models. And as I was saying, semantic models are great for that. However, there's also the upstream creation of the BI artifacts, the Power BI semantic model, the reports, etc. And we already have some capabilities that have been released in that area for report creation. But there's a lot going on in that space with MCP and lots of other areas. And we have nothing to announce right now, but I can't help but say that we are working diligently on this. Is something that we will be making things available in this space. So please do watch this space.
Yeah, and one more thing to add there, I think we definitely recognize that like AI has a huge opportunity of how it can benefit the developer space, not just the consumer space for BI. We know that like sometimes doing a lot of things manually in the product today can be very tedious, right? Certain actions can be really tedious, time consuming. And also we know that it has a pretty big learning curve for many newbies, right? And so we do see an element of where we can kind of invest more in the kind of what we call like the creator Copilot space to really enable more of that accelerated workflows for users, and also kind of minimize kind of the amount of time it takes to do, especially like a lot of repetitive tasks. So I think this is definitely a space we can't share too much details right now at this point, but it's definitely a space that we are heavily investing in. And so stay tuned to see more of how we kind of really accelerate creators here.
Okay. And then we have a question on this live stream from Haliport. Sorry again if I'm mispronouncing your name, but they'd like to know a little bit about the current Power BI job opportunity. So I think the thinking about this is, careers in Power BI. It's a very interesting topic. We just celebrated Power BI's 10th anniversary, and we've seen so many people transform their careers into really becoming those data professionals. So you're no longer just a BI analyst or a data analyst. You're actually transforming yourself to be a data professional. So Power BI doesn't just teach you how to build, reports and dashboards, shiny looking, but it's also about modeling the data, defining those business metrics, preparing your data. So there's a lot of future career growth in this space, and so I would really encourage you to learn about this new set of topics that's coming in with respect to Copilot and prepping your data for it.
And I can also add to that too, is I'd also encourage to think also broadly just in general about the Fabric ecosystem, right? With Fabric being relatively new, there's still very few people that have like 100% expertise across the end-to-end, right? And so there's a ton of value and opportunity of being at the forefront of that and becoming a Fabric expert. There's a ton of job opportunities with that, of like knowing kind of the full like end-to-end data stack, and how you can kind of empower organizations to really like move fast across getting themselves in a healthy data culture completely from like start to finish. So I think there's a ton of opportunities there that go beyond just Power BI, but also in the Fabric space too.
Absolutely.
100%. Can I just add real quick, Nandini?
Yep.
So this is a topic that's also close to my heart, in that, our overriding mission is to empower every individual and every org on the planet to achieve more through BI. But it is very rewarding for us as the product management team to see people progress their careers by taking a bet on Power BI and investing in the skills to make customers successful using Power BI. So this is something that's very rewarding. That's something that we take very seriously, is to make the customer successful, but also through the consultants, the practitioners, the BI professionals who invest time into learning and skilling up on Power BI. So thank you for the question.
Awesome. So Hazel asks, can this be used as a replacement for fine tuning? I'm assuming this means one of the prep your data for AI feature. Lauren, do you have any comment on this?
Yeah, I have a bit of question. I'd love to understand exactly what, Hazel, you're asking with this. So I would say that today our prep data for AI features is kind of how we think about fine tuning on the model in terms of like how you fine tune in other AI experiences out in the marketplace. So I'd love to understand if there's another thing you're referencing that we already have in the product today that you're saying is a replacement, but I would say that this is the way that you can get that model tuned for AI today.
Okay, so Hazel, if you have any more clarifications, please add some additional context in the chat and we can get back to that question. Shreya asks, what Copilot features use descriptions? We prefer using descriptions as opposed to synonyms. So is that the right way to approach prepping the semantic model for AI so users can actually chat with the data? Lara or Lauren?
Yeah, sure. So I think that this was answered in chat as well by our Microsoft Reactor. But today, the features that use Copilot descriptions. So there's a couple of different kinds of descriptions. You have your semantic model description and then the actual descriptions that are on the columns themselves. The descriptions within the columns are used for anything related to Copilot and DAX. So today you have your DAX query view where you can create a DAX measure, and descriptions are taken into account on that Copilot feature, as well as if you go into our Copilot standalone or the full screen experience from home. When you ask a data question, the first thing that's going to happen is we find the right artifact or the semantic model or report to answer the question from. So that capability of searching for the right data to answer the question from, descriptions are also taken into account for that capability. The capability that we have where a user asks the data question and or asks a question about their data and then Copilot answers it. That capability today does not utilize descriptions. So my question back to you on this is I'd love to understand why it is that you prefer using descriptions to synonyms. We have definitely looked into adding descriptions before. We've done a couple of different POCs on it. And so it's something we've talked about. And yeah, would love to understand more why that's your preferred approach. But those are the capabilities that utilize descriptions today with Copilot.
Okay. So I'll go back to another question that we've sort of seen recurring coming from customers, maybe in customer conversations as well as Reddit threads. People want to know what are some common pitfalls that teams face when building semantic models for that use of AI. Like what are some of those bad practices, and how can people avoid them?
Yeah, I can cover that one. So I think I'll start with kind of a few that I've seen off the bat, and then I can go into a few more detailed ones. So I think some of the most immediate things that I see off the bat of like bad practices is where people have not spent a lot of time on like their naming conventions, and just in general, the naming is either ambiguous or cryptic. And so what I mean by that is ambiguous naming could be like you have multiple fields or table names that are either like similarly like written, like they have sales in it and it's like different types of sales, or they're similarly like semantically, right? Like imagine you have a field that's like geo versus region, and Copilot doesn't understand when to use region versus when to use geo, because to Copilot, they seem almost like synonyms, right? And so I think there's the element of the naming is either cryptic or ambiguous, or the naming could also just be like poor naming conventions, like maybe having things of like acronyms, having, short form naming that Copilot wouldn't understand. And a really good analogy that I would give people to help kind of conceptualize this is imagine you let a human look at your OneDrive and just like figure out whatever folder structure you have or whatever files you have, and you tell them go find file X, right? If a human couldn't be able to figure out how to go find file X among like the mess that you may have in your OneDrive, you can imagine that an AI is going to struggle to do the same thing. So I think right off the bat is you definitely need to put in effort to really make sure that naming that you have within your fields and table names, that it has minimal ambiguity and it shouldn't be cryptic. So I think that's like number one. I think also the number two thing I would say is sometimes we see semantic models that are like really bloated. And I'll explain a bit what I mean by bloated. And this oftentimes happens more with like large enterprises where they started off building a semantic model. And then over the years, as requirements increase and they want new things, the data modeler ended up adding new measures, new dimensions, all of that. And so we end up with sometimes a model that is actually trying to do too much, right? Think of it like a model that may have multiple subjects that it's trying to all surface and solve within that one semantic model. And so it's like it's trying to solve so many different use cases. And the issue with trying to solve so many different use cases is you're again going back to the problem around ambiguity, is you may introduce ambiguity by nature of trying to solve so many different use cases. And so I think that's when we recommend that for these type of bloated models is either A, you need to figure out a way of how do you kind of consolidate information into either individual models, or B, put in perspectives. And right now we are looking into ways of how do we invest more in perspectives and surfacing that information to Copilot to help with the bloated model situation. But currently the best workaround is really just thinking about making your semantic models just really a lot more focused. So it's not like overly bloated and introducing a ton of ambiguity. And I think similar with the bloated scenario is also, Lauren kind of alluded to this, is like where sometimes the report or the model itself may have certain report specific context, like you added a like custom string measure for a custom title in your report, right? Like that type of fields doesn't necessarily need to be exposed to Copilot if it's only being used for the purpose of like the traditional reporting for, let's say, a custom title in a visual. So that's like another example of it doesn't necessarily need to be exposed to Copilot, and it's a great use case for using what Lauren mentioned around the schema selection for AI of choosing to remove that from the view of Copilot. And then the last thing I would say here is also just really thinking about, like, I know we do have synonyms, but being mindful too that with synonyms, you have to use it properly, right? Like if you're using synonyms wrong and you're also introducing ambiguity, or you're using synonyms more as like thesaurus definitions, that's actually not really benefiting how AI is able to help understand your fields. Because if you're introducing a lot of ambiguity, like imagine you have synonyms for, let's say the geo and the region field, and you have the same synonyms for that, that's not going to be helpful for the AI to figure out how to use geo versus region. So I think just really being cautious of any sort of ambiguity you're introducing, whether that's through field names or whether that's through synonyms, and just any unnecessary bloat that you have in the model, of just really clean it up to what is like the core most important measures and dimensions that you do want AI to be able to pick up on, and you do want to kind of enable those like AI powered experiences for your end users. I think that's kind of those are kind of the key points.
Great answer. Hopefully that's helpful, because good semantic model practices are so important as organizations start to adopt AI. I see a question from Zahir that I don't think we got to. They ask, we do have a Power BI report server for other units. Can we use AI in that on-prem server? And so this again, similar answer as above. We primarily offer Copilot, which is what I think you're referring to when you say AI, in the Fabric Capacity SKU licenses. So F2 and above, it is a cloud offering, and so you would have to sort of look at the Fabric Capacity SKU in order to access Copilot capabilities. And I feel like it's the same with even some of the other AI capabilities like AI insights, anomaly detection. Isn't that right, Christine, Lada? Do we offer any AI features at all in the report server version?
No, we don't offer Copilot or anomaly detection. So yeah, as you said, F2 and above for Copilot today. Back to the previous question, we are going to make it more widely available, but we don't have any plans to make Copilot available on Power BI Report Server at this time. Yeah.
Great. So Peter asked a question. Curious to know how AI changes Power BI to implement new AI changes in Power BI using Copilot. I'm not exactly following the question,
I
but
think I might need more clarification on the question.
Peter, if you can add some more details into your question, I think we'll get back to it. But it sounds interesting. And Zahir asked a follow-up question to your point, Sujata. You mentioned some semantic models are bloated. So what do you consider? Yeah. Can you add more color there?
A really good a good way of kind of figuring out, have you reached a bloated semantic model? So I think the first thing is look at usage, right? Like look at which fields are actually being used. If you see majority of fields are actually not being used downstream, that's a really good sign you may have either a bloated semantic model or just in general a semantic model that may not necessarily meet the kind of business requirements of what your end users actually want. So it could be a little bit of a mixture of both. So I think that's one good way to tell if like parts of it are not being used. That's like a good example of bloated. And then the other way of telling is looking at who is that semantic model surfacing, right? Like surfacing for, right? Is it trying to solve too many different personas? And those personas, those like kind of end user personas, they have kind of slightly very similar sounding dimensions, but they're actually different. That's also going to create a lot of ambiguity. That's going to just make it really hard for an AI to be able to distinguish, at least not without some additional context that you may add through custom instructions. So obviously you can put those instructions in, or you can put kind of those clarifications of in-custom instructions around those, kind of the differences in some of those use cases of when to use which field versus another. But I think in general, it's probably best practice to really kind of focus on how can you make sure each semantic model you have is kind of doing what its main purpose is and doing that well, like focus on that first, rather than it trying to solve a bunch of different purposes and doing those kind of mediocrely.
Yeah. Can I add something to that as well? So thanks, Sujata. I completely agree, as always. So I would just like to add that these best practices, honestly, there were previous incarnations or these best practices already existed even before AI, right? Because it was a best practice not to include columns that weren't used, to bloat not just the amount of columns visible to end users, but the size of the model, right? And we've had this problem before where business users will try to create ad hoc reports from a semantic model and become overwhelmed by the volume and the number of tables and fields and measures and everything they see in the field list, right? So it was a best practice even prior to AI to allow business users to consume from semantic models more easily, to not have them overwhelmed by too many tables, columns, and measures. And that is even more relevant now in the world of AI, in the age of AI. And as Sujata said, we will be, in some cases, you do need to have quite a large model for large reusability across large organizations with thousands of users, where there are certain dimensions that do serve lots of different personas and different divisions in your business. Like you might have customer and date dimensions and things that are reused across finance and marketing, etc. And so some degree it does make sense to keep them in the same model, but you just need to strike a balance there to not overdo it. And when you do start having a large model, you need to start using things like perspectives so that the business user isn't overwhelmed, especially when they're consuming through AI. And as Sujata said, we will leverage perspectives in the future for AI as well. But yeah, this is kind of like another incarnation of a problem that has existed for a long time. And this just goes back to having good semantic models for ad hoc business user consumption is precisely what puts us in such a good position, because we have so many of them in the market. We've been tackling this problem for so long. It's precisely what puts us in a strong position to execute well for business user consumption through AI on top of semantic models, right?
Great point.
Yeah.
And so Martian asked a very interesting question. Copilot in Power BI seems focused on semantic models and reports, but as somebody building pipelines that feed those models, how can they think about what they should be doing for Copilot? It's a broader question. Any takers? Sujata,
I can. So this is a question more for the data integration team and the pipelines team. Suffice to say, we're not I'm not the expert in this area, but I do know that team is investing heavily. Microsoft is investing heavily in Copilot across every single customer-facing product, right? So I'm very confident that there are some very impressive Copilot capabilities for pipelines, but we would have to kind of relay that question to the
way I'm interpreting this is, there's data preparation at the semantic model layer and, the layer. But at the pipeline layer, is there something they should be doing to have, your accurate and your consistent Copilot outputs? Is there something they can be doing at that pipeline stage when they're ingesting the data? Or is this,
Yeah, so I would say to Christian's point, like, it definitely seems in this webcast that, Copilot Power BI and calls and reports. And I say that's because for the Power BI team. So there's definitely things like, I know, as Christian mentioned, the team that's in charge of these pipelines that is also implementing AI. but that would be a team different than the people on this call today. So I would say, yes, absolutely, there's experiences that are there. I would not say that we are the experts to answer those questions on this call.
So in the meantime, we'll take another question from Shreya.
I think you missed
when it comes to measures.
Sorry.
Yeah,
I think we missed one question earlier from.
Go ahead.
It says, could you explain DAX and Power BI and how beginners can get good at it?
Yeah. Go for it.
It's hard for many people. So it's actually interesting that you're going to see the connection I make of where sometimes I see that the reason people struggle with DAX, it actually kind of originates from having a really complex model. We have our DAX expert, Jeffrey, on the team. He has this like classic quote that is like, DAX is only hard if your model is bad. And that's where you see like a lot of folks like Marco and all like the DAX gods that you see in the community is they end up helping a lot of people, and they end up kind of working with a lot of people and around DAX, and they end up finding out very similar things, is that the more complex you make the model, the more complex the DAX becomes. Because for simple models, DAX is actually like works quite well. So even, for example, if you use our DAX Copilot experience in our DAX query view, you'll see that if you do have a relatively simple model, you can get quite far with kind of the DAX that you can generate and the DAX queries you can generate. It's where that sometimes where you see a little bit more of a struggle is that if you're trying to get kind of a complex model to work even with like a DAX query, like for any type of DAX query on a very complex model, that's where you kind of start to see that the experience does kind of falter a bit. And it's where you have to actually go back to what we've been kind of stating a lot in this call of going back to the basics and making sure your semantic model is following best practices. And if there's ways to improve your semantic model so that the DAX becomes a lot more straightforward, I think that's kind of step one. And then in terms of kind of how to help beginners get good at it. So I say it's like, first, again, starting with the semantic model, making sure that it is actually following best practices, that it is not overly complex in ways that it doesn't need to be. And then I would say to help beginners kind of get good at DAX, I think definitely the DAX query view can help jumpstart scenarios, but it's still not a replacement for kind of understanding of what the DAX query is actually doing. Because obviously with any AI experience, you can't just, take whatever is suggested and not validate of like making sure that that answer, what the response is correct. So you do need the ability to at least be able to interpret DAX queries to validate that it's accurate. But you will with DAX query view be able to help jumpstart some of those calculations. I think is really good for a lot of beginners.
100%. If I may, I can't help myself. I need to chime in as well. 100% agree for the fourth time today with Sujata. So let's see. DAX is much simpler if you have a good model, even for complex analytical scenarios, right? Number one. And number two is, even if you're good at DAX, like, there are some DAX practitioners out there that make a living out of being really good at DAX, and they need all the answers to be very precise and predictable, and that's all good. But the DAX query view Copilot is, as Sujata said, it's going to be a head start. It's going to just make it more. Make you more productive as a DAX practitioner. Even a DAX practitioner who is pretty good at writing DAX, some of them might be a little bit lazy and just want to get a head start in terms of in a DAX query, and that's what the Copilot is really good at. And it's the same with GitHub Copilot, right? You're going to typically review the work that GitHub Copilot, the code that GitHub Copilot writes for you. But it's going to be a big productivity boost in terms of having to remember the specific syntax and all the function names and just getting you to first base. It makes it a lot easier. Like, I don't think I've written I occasionally write the odd DAX query. I don't consider myself to be a top level DAX expert. But whenever I do write a DAX query today, I always start with the DAX query view Copilot to just get me started. Thank you.
Yeah, sorry. I just want to add one more thing to that as well. So in case first part of like, could you explain what DAX and Power BI is? If you have no idea what it is, think about within your Excel sheet how you create formulas. That's essentially what DAX is doing in Power BI. So it's creating measures or calculations for you. And like Christian and Sujata mentioned, knowing the data, making sure that it's in a good spot is going to be the most helpful. But I also am no DAX expert, and I personally have been using the DAX Copilot feature in the DAX query view to write measures, and it actually can also explain the measure as well. So like mentioned, not just, writing it and then leaving it and trusting that, but you can use Copilot to say, explain what happened in this measure that you created for me. And I found that really helpful as well. So honestly, my take would be the way for beginners to get good at it is start utilizing it with the Copilot experience in DAX query view today. And then I think you'll be able to learn from that.
Yeah. For a lot of people, it can be intimidating because it's like learning a new language altogether. And then Paul also shared some documentation in the chat. So hopefully that's helpful to help you get started. So I'll keep it moving. We have a question from Shreya again, who asks about measures. So do you think simpler measures with less complexity are easier for Copilot to use? And complexity here is defined as many variables, filter context modifications, conditionals, etc. So how would you think about it? Sujata, you want to take this?
I don't know if Christian's talking, if he's muted.
Yeah, sorry. Do you want to go first, Sujata, or
yeah, I can go first and say is, so I think it depends on what the context is that you're asking the question for. So if you're asking in the question for more of the chat with your data type scenarios where it just needs to be able to reference an existing measure, I think that's going to come down to what we've mentioned earlier around making sure you have proper description in place, making sure that you have proper naming for what that measure is, that there isn't ambiguity around similar sounding measures. So I think the complexity of the DAX itself wouldn't impact the ability for Copilot to find that actual measure if you're talking in the scenario for like chat with your data where you're trying to reference a measure by its name. So it's really more about like how well you've given the metadata around that measure that matters in that case.
100%. And I'll just quickly add that, DAX can be complex in certain scenarios. However, for a business user or for an AI asking a business question in business language and context, for example, what is gross production year-over-year growth for certain dimensions like product and region for a certain time period or something, right? The DAX that is submitted to the model is actually much simpler than the SQL that would be required to generate that answer on the fly. You would have to do 17 different joins. You have to do all sorts of crazy calculations. Whereas if all of that semantics and all of that business logic is contained, the predefined relationships, the year-over-year growth calculation, the relationships to all the dimensions, then the business user or the AI can just ask that business-oriented question, right? And that maximizes the reusability of that logic, and it maximizes consistency and single version of the truth and consistent decisions, right? So I just wanted to point that out, that this is actually, putting this logic in the semantic model is actually very beneficial for AI consumption. Yeah.
Great. Let's get to another question from Yash. Yash asks if we have one core semantic model that stores every table and universal measures with further semantic models that have maybe departmental level measures, will this confuse the AI because you have different sort of measures, definitions of these measures?
So let's see. Does anyone want to go first, or do you want me to take a shot at this one?
Yeah, Christian, you can go first on this one. Yeah.
Okay. So Yash, thank you again for the question. I mean, this is a similar problem to what we've had before. You have like a master semantic model that defines enterprise level corporate metrics across a large organization that need to be consistent, right? Things that are very important, right? Like the sales for an organization or safety measures and things that really determine monetary value of things and people's remuneration and safety measures and things like that. It's very important that these measures are consistent. And then in some cases, there will be more kind of departmental semantic models that need to inherit some core logic from the central model, and then have more kind of departmental level definitions. And it's the same. It's the same kind of organizational discipline problem that existed before AI. To be perfectly honest, Yash, like if you make your central model prepped for AI, easily discoverable, the AI will pick up that this is the most popular definitive version of the truth in the organization. It will use all sorts of signals to identify that this is the definitive source of the truth, like organizational proximity, popularity, certification status, and business definition, and it will surface that model more prominently than the other models that perhaps are not as relevant. But yeah, again, this is a problem that has existed for a long time, and it's primarily, honestly, like we provide the technology, and it's down to the organization, the customer organization, to implement organizational discipline to promote that single version of the truth. Right? Does that help? I don't know. Hopefully that helps.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So I know we're sort of. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to add one quick thing to that is also just thinking about, it's very similar to the like kind of the theme of we've been saying around ambiguity of like, if your central model is like, if you have I'll just use an example, if you have a measure called sales, and then you have a kind of a subset of that model where it's looking at a specific department, where it's like the sales from contributing from that department. And if you also name that sales, you're still introducing ambiguity, right? So when you use certain standalone Copilot experiences, like Copilot will struggle to be able to differentiate between that too. So it comes down to like Christian was saying, is like that discipline of really making sure it's very clear exactly like what level of altitude, like what level of granularity that a specific measure is applying to, right? And making that very clear in the names and the descriptions. Those go a really long way to help make sure AI can understand how to distinguish between a measure that's at a higher altitude versus one that's been like filtered down to a subset.
100%. Yeah, that's my fifth agreement with Sujata. 100%. The really accurate descriptive names, and with spaces in them, capitalized correctly, the way that business users would expect. That's so valuable. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. So, I know we're coming at time. The team is sort of happy to stay over a little bit and answer a few more questions. So there is a question again from Martian about pipelines, streaming terabytes of data into Fabric pipelines. I'm going to skip over this question, Martian, because I know Paul provided some additional details to you, and hopefully you'll be able to access some of our documentation and dig into the details there. The team that we have here is more focused on Power BI, but I hope you get some answers to your questions. And then Daniel asks, perhaps asked already, but I don't think so. Should we have any concerns of data security with a Copilot license, especially when going from CRM to Copilot to Power BI? So we'll leave the specific scenario aside, but data security when it comes to Copilot, how should users be thinking about that?
So yeah, there's a documentation that we provided in the chat that can walk you through the privacy and security responsibilities that we follow. But just long story short, Copilot features all use the Azure OpenAI service. So it's fully controlled by Microsoft. Your data is not used to train models. It's not available to other customers. You retain control over where your data is processed. So your data stays within your geographic region unless you explicitly allow data to be processed outside in your tenant settings. So it's stored in your capacity or your region, and it's not moving over boundaries unless you specifically set on that setting so that you can use Azure OpenAI. And we also don't store your data for abuse monitoring. So we use an automated process to be able to so initially we used to store data to make sure that we didn't have any harmful intent. And so we moved to an automated process where that's done automatically. So that's just for chain 30 days. But if you go through the docs, we do take data privacy, data security very seriously with Copilot enablement. And then even on the Power BI side, it does respect row level security, column level security. But if there's any additional questions, feel free to ask in the chat.
Awesome. We have a question from Hamid. It says, can Copilot work with DBT, which is very rich? DBT, I know, is again more in the DI/DW area, but any takers for this question, or if we can redirect them to, again, some of our documentation?
I guess it might be a clarifying question. Is by DBT, do they mean the open source, kind of the external open source DBT format from DBT Labs, or do they mean something else?
Right, I was thinking the same thing. So, is it DBT Labs that generates transformations and logic at a SQL level on top of a data warehouse? That's what I think it is. I'm not 100% sure, but I would say that, Hamid, if you should I feel free to chime in as well, but I would say that our standard answer is that if you put a semantic model in direct query mode, it will work on top of these relational sources, including Snowflake and BigQuery and DBT. And then if you have a semantic model, then that gives you a vehicle to make that data available for AI consumption. But yeah, you would require a semantic model, at least in direct query mode. So Jada, is that in the direction that you were going in?
Yeah, that's what I answered too. Yeah.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Great. So with that, we'll wrap up this webinar. I know there's more questions in the chat, and we can stay on chat to help answer some of those questions. Thank you, everybody, for your time. Thank you to our lovely experts who have spent their time today going deep as well as broad into so many topics. And with that, I'll hand it back to you, Anna.
Thank you, everyone, for joining. Thank you so much to our experts. This session is a part of a series. To watch past episodes and register for future shows, you can follow the link that's on the screen or in the chat. We're always looking to improve our sessions and your experience. If you have any feedback for us, we would love to hear what you have to say. You can find that link on the screen or in the chat. Today's event ID is 26197, and we'll see you at the next one.